Aha, here it is. It's a Japanese word. It's pronounced kintsugi, but it's formed from two words, kin and tsugi. Kin means golden and tsugi means joinery. It's the Japanese art dating from about the 15th century of repairing broken pottery with a lacquer that's mixed with gold dust. So instead of being hidden, the cracks are highlighted as part of the history of the object. And the resulting piece, the art piece that is created, is very often more valuable than the original object. So I have some examples to show you. There's a lovely kintsugi plate and a bowl. And there's another bowl. So you can see that the pieces are absolutely unique, because even if the bowls were the same to start with, you can't possibly break two bowls exactly the same way, right? Every one is a unique art object. And I think it's a marvelous metaphor for life, for the life of each of us that we construct, because we all have imperfections, right? We all have, chips and dings and cracks, mistakes we've made, hurts we've received, hurts we've caused. And how we deal with those and how we integrate them into our lives is what makes us a unique person by the time we get to be an adult. People respond to the cracks in their lives in different ways. Some don't really make any attempt at all to heal the cracks. They just let them be broken and kind of wallow in them. And some people, in fact, I think it's a very common response, try to pretend that the cracks never happened. This is the repair the bowl with clear epoxy and just pretend that, it never really got broken to begin with, which of course you can't really pretend, because when you've repaired a bowl, you can see the cracks and it's never really quite exactly back again. But it's a whole bowl. It's serviceable, but it's clearly broken. Or you can work on the healing, acknowledge that's just what happened and here's how I dealt with it, and create of your life essentially a work of art, which isn't perfect. It's not flawless. It's not unbroken, but it's beautiful. It's whole and it's complete, and it's who you are. That's kind of the Kintsugi approach. We're not going to pretend the bowl never got broken. We're going to say, wow, it did, and even the repair is beautiful. We've turned that bowl into literally a work of art. So I chose this approach, the idea of not flawless, but whole, as an entry point into looking at this particular verse in Matthew. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. This verse bothers people. It used to bother Fran Matthews. You remember Fran Matthews, Jim's mom? The lady up on the roof in the old historical pictures when we were redoing the roof the first time. She would come to me and say, what does this mean? I can't be perfect. What does it mean? And it distressed her, I could tell. To be perfect is kind of an impossible command. I don't know about you, but most days I've blown it by lunchtime. I mean, who runs around being perfect? And that's kind of a clue that there might be a disconnect about this verse and how we're reading it. Because Jesus sets us challenging commandments, like love your neighbor. That's got a lot of challenge in it. but he doesn't really ask us to do impossible things. So if he didn't mean be perfect the way we're thinking of it, what did he mean? And I think the difficulty comes in the fact that Matthew's written in Greek and we're reading it in English. We hear the word perfect and we think no mistakes, right? Flawless, unbroken, no mistakes, because that's what perfect means to us. I got a perfect score on the exam. The Greek word in question is teleos. And teleos, you can translate it as perfect, but like most words, when you go from one language to another, you have other choices of how to render that word. And in this case, when you look it up in your handy dandy little Greek dictionary, the other choices are things like complete, whole, or if you're referring to a person, mature, full grown. So it means more than perfect in the flawless sense. So for example, we could look at a Kintsugi bowl and say, oh, well, that's not perfect. It's been broken. Right? Not perfect. But we could say, it's whole, it's complete, it's beautiful, it's teleos. It's a perfect example of what it's supposed to be, but it's not flawless. And I think that's where the disconnect comes, that we think Jesus is saying have no flaws, never make a mistake. And that's why we give up by lunchtime, because, we just do. But what if instead he's saying, be a whole person, be a complete person, be a grown-up? And that's the way modern translations like the Message, for example, will take that verse in the direction of be a grown-up. That gets us out of the flawless, perfect equals flawless. Kintsugi is another interesting way to think about a debate that goes on around us all the time. And that's the question, the general question of, should I repair this or should I replace it? I see that debate a lot in historic preservationist circles, right? Where people are constantly trying to save some historic building from being bulldozed. And the people who are bulldozing, they just want to put up something that's nice and modern and functional, glass and steel and easy to keep clean and easy to maintain. And I get that there are some good reasons occasionally to do that, but I think I'm a preservationist by nature. Old buildings have a different energy than new ones do. They have the energy of all the things that have ever happened in them. And yes, they're expensive to restore, and yes, they're a pain in the ass to keep in good working order, but they are marvelous to inhabit. And it's different from being in a modern building. So it's kind of a question of what is it you want as the end goal there? What do you value in that situation? Because once you destroy a piece of history, of course, you can't get it back. You can't build an old building. You can only repair the ones that you've got. It feels like the modern world is leaning more and more in the direction of replacing things rather than repairing them. More and more things are disposable. They're not designed to be repaired. And when the cost of an object comes down far enough, you have to weigh it against the time that it takes you to repair it. I was thinking the other day, I'll bet if I showed Betsy a darning egg, that you use to darn a hole in a sock, which I learned growing. How many of you learned how to darn a sock when you grew up? Yeah, right. Children of Depression era parents, so we learned how to do those things. But I doubt Betsy would even know what a darning egg was, let alone how to use it. Because, I mean, you get a hole in the toe of your sock today, toss it, right? It's not worth your time. But we are also beginning to be aware of the cost to the planet of constantly treating things as disposable, because it's staggering the amount that people throw away across the board. So that slogan about reduce, recycle, repair, however, what order those R words are in, it's like the movement is beginning to say, whoa, the pendulum may have swung a little too far in that direction. Repairing things, which is essentially what Kintsugi is, really, really, really is important, because you can't just throw away everything as soon as it breaks. And to continue this metaphor, I really got carried away with Kintsugi this week, I tell you. I was finding examples everywhere. But the other one I want to mention particularly is that in a way you could view the changes that are happening in the wider church as a question of repair versus replace. Because there are some aspects of the Christian church taken broadly that are broken. I mean, they just are. If we're going to make the church honest and relevant for the 21st century, it can't look like it did in, 200 years ago. That's history's great, but you got to keep this thing functioning. You got to keep it in good working order if you're going to continue to live in that house. And for some people, that effort is just too big. It's just too much. And they would much rather just chuck the whole thing. Church, Christianity, just chuck it and go do something different. And that's a debate, because it is a lot of work to chart a different course that holds on to what's valuable about Christianity, how it got started, the message that is so timeless. That be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Read in a wider sense as be a grown up, be mature, be complete. It's the last line of the paragraph about love your enemies, which is probably one of the most challenging teachings that Jesus left. It's also one of the most profound and one of the most life transforming. It's really an astonishing teaching, but you can't do it unless you are yourself approaching it as a whole person, as a grown-up, with all that you have been through and learned in your life. So history matters. You have to be discriminating about what you spend your time on to restore and repair and keep in good working order. And in some ways, I see a very direct connection between Kintsugi and what we're doing at College Heights, because we're trying to build something that doesn't look exactly like church did when we grew up. This is not a 1950s version of a congregational church, and it's definitely not perfect. That's not the goal. But it is something beautiful. It's something deliberate and built with love and a sense of being aware of what we're trying to do. It's yeah, it's like building a Kintsugi church. It's putting back the pieces and making a work of art out of it. Anyway, those are my thoughts about kintsugi. Tell me what it brought up for you.